Picture this. A Roman emperor sits alone in his tent on the Germanic frontier, surrounded by the chaos of war, disease ravaging his armies, and the weight of an entire empire pressing down on his shoulders. Yet his hand moves steadily across parchment, writing words that would echo through centuries. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This wasn't just philosophical musing from Marcus Aurelius. This was mental training in its purest form, forged in the crucible of real adversity. But here's what's truly remarkable. The same mental disciplines that helped this emperor remain unshakable in the face of barbarian invasions. Political betrayal and personal loss are available to you right now, today, in whatever battles you're fighting in your own life. What if I told you that there's an ancient technology of the mind so powerful that it can make you virtually immune to the emotional chaos that derails most people? What if you could develop such mental strength that criticism bounces off you like raindrops off armor, that setbacks become stepping stones, and that uncertainty transforms from a source of anxiety into a playground for growth? The ancient Stoics didn't just theorize about this, they lived it, tested it in gladiatorial arenas, on battlefields, in exile, and in the corridors of power. They discovered something profound. Your mind can become an impenetrable fortress, but only if you train it daily with the right practices. Right now, as you're listening to this, your mind is probably racing with worries about tomorrow's meeting, replaying yesterday's mistakes, or spinning scenarios about things completely outside your control. You're not alone in this. We live in an age where mental chaos has become the norm, where our attention is constantly hijacked, where we've forgotten one of humanity's most crucial skills, the ability to direct our own thoughts. But the Stoics knew something we've forgotten, that mental training isn't just helpful, it's essential for anyone who wants to live with genuine strength, peace, and purpose. The transformation I'm about to share with you isn't theory. It's a battle-tested system that has created some of history's most resilient minds. From slave to emperor, from exile to sage, the Stoics proved that circumstances don't determine your mental state, your training does. And by the end of this journey together, you'll have the tools to begin building that same unshakable mental fortress in your own life. Let's begin with perhaps the most foundational insight the Stoics discovered, one that changed everything for Marcus Aurelius during those brutal campaigns along the Danube River. As plague swept through his armies and Germanic tribes pressed against Roman borders, the emperor faced a choice that every human being faces daily. He could focus on what was happening to him, or he could focus on how he chose to respond. This distinction between what happens to you and how you respond to what happens to you became the cornerstone of Stoic mental training. Epictetus, who knew something about powerlessness, having spent years as a slave, put it this way: "Some things are within our power while others are not." This sounds simple, almost obvious, but watch what happens when you really apply this principle to your daily life. That promotion you didn't get, not in your control. Your response to not getting it, whether you become bitter or use it as motivation to improve, completely in your control. The traffic jam that's making you late, not in your control, whether you spend that time in frustrated rage or use it for reflection and planning, entirely your choice. But here's where most people stumble. They know this intellectually, but they haven't trained their minds to automatically make this distinction in the heat of the moment. The Stoics understood that knowing something and having trained yourself to live it are completely different things. Marcus Aurelius didn't just read about this principle. He drilled it into his consciousness through daily mental exercises, constantly asking himself, is this something I can control or something I cannot? Imagine developing this mental reflex so strongly that when someone cuts you off in traffic, your mind immediately categorizes it. They're driving, not my control. My response, completely my control. When your boss criticizes your work, their opinion, not my control. How I receive feedback and what I do with it, my control. When the stock market crashes, economic forces, not my control. How I prepare for and respond to economic uncertainty, my control. This isn't about becoming passive or resigned. It's about channeling your mental energy only toward what can actually be influenced by your actions. The Stoics called this process the discipline of desire, training yourself to want what happens rather than demanding that what you want should happen. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes, but rather becoming so focused on your response that external events lose their power to destabilize you. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing in his personal journal, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present moment is where your power actually exists." This leads us to another crucial aspect of Stoic mental training that Seneca mastered during his years of political exile. When Emperor Claudius banished him to the desolate island of Corsica, Seneca could have spent his days in bitter resentment, plotting revenge, or wallowing in self-pity. Instead, he used this apparent catastrophe as an opportunity to deepen his philosophical practice and strengthen his mental discipline. He wrote some of his most profound works during this period, demonstrating a principle that can revolutionize how you handle your own setbacks. Every obstacle contains within it the seeds of opportunity, but only if you train your mind to look for them. The Stoics developed a mental exercise they called the view from above, imagining yourself rising high enough to see your current problems in their proper perspective. When Seneca found himself exiled on a rocky island, he practiced seeing himself from the perspective of the cosmos itself. From that vantage point, his exile wasn't a cosmic injustice. It was a brief moment in the vast story of existence, and more importantly, it was an opportunity to practice philosophy without the distractions of Roman political life. You can apply this same mental training to whatever challenges you're facing right now. That relationship that ended. From the view above, it's one chapter in your larger story of learning about love, compatibility, and personal growth. The job you lost, a redirection towards something that might serve you better, and definitely an opportunity to develop resilience and resourcefulness. The health scare that's keeping you awake at night, a reminder of life's preciousness and a chance to prioritize what truly matters. But the Stoics weren't naive optimists who pretended that bad things were actually good things. They were realists who understood that how you frame an experience determines its impact on your mental state. Seneca didn't pretend that exile was pleasant. He acknowledged its hardships, while simultaneously training his mind to extract value from the experience. This mental discipline, the ability to find opportunity within obstacle, requires daily practice, not just intellectual agreement. The most practical way to develop this skill is through what the Stoics called evening reflection. Each night Seneca would review his day, not to judge himself harshly, but to identify moments where he could have responded more skillfully. He'd ask himself, where did I let external events control my internal state? What opportunities for growth did I miss? How can I respond better tomorrow? This wasn't self-flagellation. It was mental training, like an athlete reviewing game film to improve performance. When you begin practicing evening reflection, you'll start noticing patterns in your thinking that you never saw before. You'll realize that certain types of situations consistently trigger the same emotional reactions. And more importantly, you'll begin to see the gap between trigger and response, a gap where choice lives. In that gap, you can insert the question that transforms everything. How can I respond to this in a way that makes me stronger? This brings us to one of the most counterintuitive aspects of Stoic mental training, something that Epictetus understood better than perhaps any philosopher in history. Born into slavery, physically disabled, and subject to the whims of masters who could beat or kill him without consequence, Epictetus discovered something that seems impossible. He realized that he was freer than most people who walked around calling themselves free. How is this possible? Because he trained his mind to understand that true freedom isn't the absence of external constraints. It's the presence of internal choice. Epictetus would tell his students, "No one can hurt you without your permission." This sounds absurd until you understand what he meant. Physical harm, yes, that can be inflicted on anyone. But psychological harm, the kind that actually shapes your character and determines your happiness, that requires your participation. When someone insults you, the insult itself is just sound waves in the air. The hurt you feel comes from the meaning you assign to those sound waves, and that assignment happens in your mind, under your control. This doesn't mean you should become emotionally numb or pretend that words don't matter. It means training your mind to choose its responses rather than defaulting to automatic reactions. When Epictetus was beaten by his master, he didn't pretend it didn't hurt physically, but he trained his mind not to add psychological suffering to physical pain by telling himself stories about how unfair life was, how he was a victim, or how this treatment diminished his worth as a human being. You can develop this same mental strength in your daily life. When someone criticizes your work, instead of immediately feeling defensive or hurt, you can train yourself to pause and ask, is there truth in this criticism that can help me improve? If so, I'll extract that value. If not, why should I let someone else's opinion determine my emotional state? When you don't get invited to that party, instead of spiraling into stories about how you're not liked or valued, you can choose to see it as information about compatibility or simply as one person's preference that doesn't define your worth. The key is understanding that your initial emotional reaction isn't wrong. It's information. But what you do with that reaction, how long you hold on to it, and what story you tell yourself about what it means, all of that is trainable. Epictetus spent years developing this mental discipline, and it made him genuinely free, even while physically enslaved. You have advantages he never had: physical freedom, educational opportunities, resources. Imagine what you could accomplish with the same mental training. This leads us to what might be the most practical daily exercise the Stoics developed: negative visualization, or as Seneca called it, premeditatio malorum. This sounds depressing, but it's actually one of the most psychologically liberating practices you can develop. The idea is simple. Regularly imagine losing the things you value most, not to become pessimistic, but to appreciate what you have, and prepare mentally for life's inevitable changes. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, would periodically live as if he were poor, eating simple food, wearing rough clothes, sleeping on the floor. This wasn't masochism, it was mental training. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, he was preparing his mind for the possibility of involuntary loss, while simultaneously discovering that his happiness didn't depend on luxury. When political fortunes shifted and he actually did lose his wealth and position, his mind was already prepared. You can adapt this practice to modern life in powerful ways. Imagine losing your job, not to create anxiety, but to appreciate having work and to mentally prepare for career transitions. Visualize your phone breaking, not to become paranoid about technology, but to recognize how much of your peace of mind you've surrendered to a device. Picture your relationship ending, not to become pessimistic about love, but to appreciate your partner more fully and to remember that your happiness can't depend entirely on another person's presence in your life. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology has rediscovered. We adapt to positive changes much faster than we expect, but we also adapt to negative changes much better than we fear. That promotion you're desperately seeking. You'll be happier for a few weeks, then it becomes your new normal. That setback you're dreading, it will be difficult initially, but you'll likely discover resources and resilience you didn't know you possessed. Negative visualization breaks the spell of hedonic adaptation by helping you see your current circumstances clearly, rather than through the haze of taking them for granted. When you regularly imagine not having something, you stop treating its presence as guaranteed and start experiencing it as a gift. This isn't about becoming morbid or pessimistic. It's about training your mind to find genuine appreciation in the present moment, rather than constantly reaching for the next thing. Marcus Aurelius practiced a version of this when he wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He wasn't being callous about genuine loss and grief. He was training his mind to see impermanence as a fundamental aspect of existence, rather than as a personal attack from the universe. When you truly internalize this perspective, loss becomes less devastating because you expected it, prepared for it, and maintained awareness that everything you love is on loan from life. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of Stoic mental training involves what they called the discipline of action, the practice of engaging fully with life while remaining detached from outcomes. This seems contradictory until you understand the psychology behind it. The Stoics realize that most people either care so much about results that anxiety paralyzes them, or they protect themselves from disappointment by not trying very hard. Both approaches lead to mediocre outcomes and internal dissatisfaction. Seneca demonstrated this principle during his time as advisor to Emperor Nero. He knew that serving as counselor to an increasingly unstable and dangerous ruler was extremely risky. He could be executed at any moment for giving unwelcome advice, yet he engaged fully with his responsibilities, offering honest counsel and trying to moderate Nero's worst impulses, while simultaneously maintaining inner detachment from whether his efforts would succeed. He did his duty excellently, while accepting that the outcomes were beyond his control. This mental stance, full engagement with detached outcomes, can revolutionize how you approach everything from job interviews to relationships to creative projects. Instead of holding back out of fear of failure or becoming so attached to specific results that you're paralyzed by anxiety, you learn to pour yourself completely into the process while accepting that results depend on factors beyond your control. Think about a job interview you're nervous about. The typical mindset is, I have to get this job, or I probably won't get it anyway, so why bother preparing? The Stoic approach is different. I'll prepare thoroughly, present myself authentically, and answer questions thoughtfully. Whether they choose me depends on factors I can't control. Their needs, other candidates, company politics. My job is to interview excellently, not to control their decision. Marcus, this shift in focus from outcome to process is psychologically liberating because it puts your attention on what you can actually influence, your preparation, effort, and performance, rather than on what you can't control, other people's decisions. Paradoxically, this often leads to better outcomes because you're not handicapped by anxiety about results. The Stoics also understood that this principle applies to how you treat other people. You can't control whether others appreciate your kindness, reciprocate your friendship, or respond positively to your efforts to help. But you can control whether you act with integrity, generosity, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." He chose to serve the common good, not because he could guarantee that others would appreciate or reciprocate, but because acting for the benefit of others was the right thing to do, regardless of their response. This leads us to one of the most challenging aspects of Stoic mental training, learning to find your sense of self-worth internally rather than externally. Epictetus taught that seeking approval from others is a form of slavery, because it puts your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to feedback or refusing to consider other people's perspectives. It means developing such a strong internal compass that external validation becomes nice to receive but not necessary for your sense of worth. The Stoics called this living according to nature, not meaning you should live in the wilderness, but that you should live according to your nature as a rational being capable of wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. When your sense of identity is grounded in developing these qualities, rather than in external achievements or other people's opinions, you become genuinely free from the emotional roller coaster that most people ride throughout their lives. This is perhaps the most difficult mental discipline to develop, because we're social creatures who naturally care about how others perceive us. The goal isn't to stop caring entirely, that would make you antisocial, but to care more about being the kind of person you respect than about whether others recognize or appreciate your qualities. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the world, regularly reminded himself that his worth came from his character, not his position. You can begin developing this internal scorecard by regularly asking yourself, am I proud of how I handled that situation, regardless of how others reacted? Did I act with integrity even when no one was watching? Am I becoming the kind of person I want to be, independent of external recognition? This isn't about arrogance or dismissing feedback. It's about developing such a clear sense of your own values that you can receive input from others without being destabilized by it. The Stoics also developed sophisticated mental techniques for dealing with anger, which they considered one of the most destructive emotions. Seneca wrote an entire book on anger, calling it temporary madness, because it clouds judgment and leads to actions you'll regret. But their approach to anger wasn't suppression, it was understanding and redirection. When someone wrongs you, The Stoic approach is to pause and ask, what did I expect from this person? Did I expect perfection from an imperfect human being? Am I angry at them for acting according to their nature and current level of development? This doesn't mean excusing genuinely harmful behavior, but it means not adding the extra suffering of outrage to whatever harm was actually done. Marcus Aurelius practiced this when dealing with difficult senators, incompetent generals, and even family members who disappointed him. Instead of raging against their flaws, he trained his mind to see their actions as the inevitable result of their current understanding and character development. This perspective allowed him to respond strategically rather than emotionally, to set appropriate boundaries without being consumed by resentment. The most practical application of this principle is in your daily interactions with people who frustrate you. That colleague who's always late. Instead of building up anger each time it happens, you can choose to see their lateness as information about their character and plan accordingly. Your partner who leaves dishes in the sink? You can frame it as an opportunity to practice patience and to have a constructive conversation about household responsibilities rather than letting resentment build. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting behavior that genuinely harms you. It means responding from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. When you're not clouded by anger, you can see situations more accurately and respond more effectively. You might decide to have a difficult conversation, set firmer boundaries, or even end a relationship, but you'll do so from wisdom rather than emotion. The Stoics understood that mastering your response to other people's behavior is one of the highest forms of mental training. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This includes how you react to other people's choices, moods, and actions. When you truly internalize that other people's behavior says more about them than about you, you become much harder to manipulate, offend, or destabilize. Perhaps the most profound insight the Stoics developed was about the nature of time and attention. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that the present moment is the only time that actually exists. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but life happens now. This isn't just philosophical poetry. It's practical mental training for one of the biggest challenges of modern life: the tendency to live everywhere except in the present moment. Think about how much of your mental energy gets consumed by replaying past conversations, imagining future scenarios, or worrying about things that might never happen. The Stoics realized that this mental time travel is one of the primary sources of human suffering. When you're fully present, problems become much more manageable because you're dealing with what's actually happening rather than with your stories about what's happening. Marcus Aurelius practiced presence during some of the most challenging circumstances imaginable, leading military campaigns, managing plagues, dealing with political conspiracies. Yet his personal writings show a man who trained himself to find peace and clarity by returning his attention again and again to the immediate moment. "Confine yourself to the present," he wrote, "not as escapism from responsibility, but as the foundation for effective action." You can develop this same mental discipline through what the Stoics called attention training. Throughout your day, notice when your mind drifts into past regrets or future anxieties, and gently bring your attention back to what's actually happening right now. What are you seeing, hearing, feeling in your body? What task is in front of you? What person are you with? This isn't meditation in the formal sense. It's the practice of living consciously rather than on autopilot. The transformation that occurs when you truly develop this skill is remarkable. Problems that seemed overwhelming when you were thinking about them abstractly become manageable when you break them down into present-moment actions. Relationships improve when you're actually present with people rather than mentally rehearsing your next response. Work becomes more satisfying when you're fully engaged with tasks rather than constantly thinking about what you'd rather be doing. But the Stoics also understood that mental training requires community and role models. They studied the lives of wise people, not to worship them, but to learn from their examples. Marcus Aurelius filled his personal journal with reminders of the qualities he admired in others: his adoptive father's patience, his philosophy teacher's integrity, his predecessor's dedication to duty. He used these examples as mental training tools, asking himself how these people would handle his current challenges. You can apply this same technique by identifying people whose mental strength you admire, whether historical figures, people in your life, or even fictional characters who embody the qualities you want to develop. When facing difficult decisions or challenging situations, ask yourself, how would this person approach this situation? What would they focus on? How would they maintain their composure? This isn't about copying others' specific actions, but about learning from their mental approaches. If you admire someone's ability to stay calm under pressure, study how they think about pressure. If you respect someone's resilience in the face of setbacks, understand their mental framework for dealing with disappointment. The Stoics believed that wisdom is learnable and that we can accelerate our development by learning from those who have walked the path before us. The daily practice of Stoic mental training ultimately comes down to consistency rather than intensity. Marcus Aurelius didn't become mentally unshakable through occasional moments of philosophical insight. He developed that strength through daily practice, constant self-reflection, and persistent application of Stoic principles to real-life situations. Seneca didn't master his response to exile through a single moment of acceptance. He trained his mind for years to see obstacles as opportunities. The same is true for your mental development. Reading about these principles is just the beginning. The transformation happens through daily application, through catching yourself when you slip back into old mental habits, through consistently choosing to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't. It happens through practicing negative visualization, not just once but regularly, through developing the habit of evening reflection, through training yourself to see other people's behavior as information about them rather than judgment about you. As you embark on this journey of mental training, remember that the goal isn't to become emotionally numb or indifferent to life's experiences. The Stoics weren't advocating for a robotic existence devoid of feeling. They were teaching a way to experience life fully, while remaining unshakable at your core, to care deeply about what matters while not being devastated by what doesn't work out as planned. The mental fortress you're building isn't a prison that cuts you off from life. It's a foundation of inner strength that allows you to engage more fully with whatever life brings. When you know that your peace of mind doesn't depend on external circumstances, you become free to pursue your goals with passion, to love without the fear of loss paralyzing you, to take risks without being crushed by potential failure. This is the promise of Stoic mental training. Not that life will become easy, but that you will become strong enough to handle whatever life presents. Not that you'll never face setbacks, but that setbacks will become opportunities for growth rather than sources of suffering. Not that others will always treat you well, but that your sense of worth won't depend on their treatment. The ancient Stoics proved that this transformation is possible. Marcus Aurelius maintained his humanity and effectiveness while bearing the weight of an empire. Seneca found meaning and purpose even in exile. Epictetus discovered freedom while physically enslaved. They weren't superhuman. They were ordinary people who developed extraordinary mental discipline through daily practice. That same transformation awaits you, but only if you're willing to do the daily work of training your mind. Start tonight with evening reflection. Review your day and notice where you let external events control your internal state. Tomorrow, practice the discipline of focusing only on what you can control. Begin to see obstacles as opportunities for mental training. Gradually develop the habit of negative visualization to appreciate what you have while preparing for change. The journey from mental chaos to mental mastery isn't quick or easy, but every day you practice these principles, you become a little more unshakable, a little more free, a little more capable of living with wisdom, courage, and peace, regardless of what the world throws at you. The Stoics discovered one of humanity's most powerful truths. You cannot control what happens to you, but you have absolute power over how you choose to respond. In that choice lies your freedom, your strength, and your path to becoming truly mentally untouchable. Your mind is waiting to be trained. Your inner fortress is waiting to be built. The only question is, will you begin today?